Yeah, welcome to the very first Asia Pacific Proptech Summit, APPS, organized by the Malaysia Proptech Association. So my name is Karen, I'm your MC today. So but with anything else, we would like to acknowledge our sponsor who took a great part for this summit. So we have our supporting partners, shout out to Magic, Cradle, MDEC, and also our event sponsors. First will be LMRE, China Mobile International, and of course MoneySafe. So in today's session, we are delighted to have our three esteemed speakers, to share their views and experiences on the topic of property due diligence, made digital and easy with trust and also transparency. So let me introduce our moderator and also our panelists today. So bear with me. So first we have our moderator, Sean Godoy. So Sean is a very professional property expert who founded the Diversity Property Solution, which offer a range of advisory and training solution to the property industry in South Africa. So he is also first one, South Africa Proptech. Second one is Proptech Association in Africa. Okay, also the Proptech business PropDD and online property due diligence in South Africa. And next we have a KW Wong. So KW Wong started the Rentlab in Malaysia, the first property rental bidding platform, providing a one-stop solution to property owners, tenants, as well as the agents. Yeah, and with over 15 years of experience in real estate, he is now advocating the truth and transparency in property rental market. Last but not least, we have Navonil Roy. So Roy just talked to me that his name, Navonil, is actually blueness for sky. It's a beautiful name. Yeah, so Roy is the principal advisor to LandOrc, which is bringing decentralized finance to fill the funding gap for property developers. Important. So he has more than 25 years working experience across tech, telecommunications, and media. So he is also actively involved in Proptech since 2017. So with that, let's start our panel discussion about due diligence in property. So Sean, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that great introduction. It's fantastic to be taking part in this very exciting Asian Proptech event. So being obviously South African based, and I work in sub-Saharan Africa, and we obviously are very passionate about our markets here, but I think it's really important to reach out to other complex markets in terms of the Proptech ecosystem to share and compare notes. So I think this is a really great connection. So I'm very happy to be here with two great Proptech minds as well. So I'd like to thank and welcome our panelists, and obviously thank you to all the sponsors and for opportunity to have myself and all of us here in this discussion. So I thought maybe we start. I know Karen provided a quick introduction, but perhaps I could just ask each of you to give a quick roundup perhaps of your background and what brought you to Proptech. So Wong, if I could ask you to start us off.
Yeah, sure, Sean. Yes, hello everyone. So my name is Wong. I'm the founder and CEO of Rentlab. So we are a startup providing a total digitalized and automated rental bidding platform. So our unique bidding mechanism actually allows fair and transparency in terms of providing information to the public, to the users, to be able to use this information to make an offer and bid directly online through the platform. Yeah, so like what Karen mentioned, yes, we are Malaysia's first property rental bidding platform.
There we go. So great to have you with us. So Navonil, if you can hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's great to be here. Let me first start by giving a background of LandOrc. So LandOrc is trying to sort of fill the funding gap that exists with property developers. We see it to be a $500 billion funding gap, where property developers, especially in high interest markets, are looking for new sources of capital. And the way LandOrc does that is it brings in capital from decentralized finance using blockchain technology so that it makes it quite transparent, fast, and we offer collateralized lending using NFTs. So we are a tech company. We already operate in India. We are going to be launching Australia. And my background has been in telecoms, tech, media. So I'm not a hardcore real estate guy, but I believe I've seen it from the outside. I've been involved in blockchain from 2017 and digital from the .com days.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I think we've got quite a nice balance of backgrounds and obviously the work that you do. And that all relates nicely to our topic, which is due diligence, and driving transparency effectively in property transactions, which come in a variety of forms, normally sales or rentals. So, and then in that, you've got buyers, you've got sellers, you've got landlords, renters, and obviously you've got investors. Navonil, well, obviously that's where the money comes in. And through all of this, due diligence is really important. And due diligence, I think it's a term in the industry, I think everyone understands what it is, especially if you're in corporate M&A, and if you're a commercial property player. I think, due diligence is established and there's quite a good structure around it. And it's crucial to protect interests, obviously, and reduce risks for parties in a transaction. So make sure you're getting what you're getting and that it's the right property for you or the right lease, etc. In the residential sector, perhaps, it's not as prevalent, but there's big value to be had by giving residential renters and buyers, perhaps better tools or better education around this. And at the end of the day, it could lead to quicker, better transactions with happier parties and hopefully increase volumes of transactions, because where things fall apart, then, this might help people push over the line to perhaps buy their first home, which is fantastic. So just to start off, I thought on that backdrop, I wanted to ask just your views about due diligence and how it currently takes place and maybe where some of the pain points are. And then you can comment on perhaps commercial, but residential, if you like. So Wong, perhaps you can start us off, please.
Yes, sure, Sean. So, okay, you mentioned about pain points and how it's currently practiced. I mean, I can only give example as what we see now in Malaysia. So there's a lot of people are using a lot of platforms in the market, to do their due diligence on the properties, whether to buy or rent, as you mentioned. So, however, we find that there's a gap there because a lot of times you can't get enough information that you're actually seeking for, when you're wanting to buy or rent a property. So most of the platform, because they are listed by probably is the agents or sometimes the landlord, they just want to provide a little bit of information, enough for you to get interest, but they don't want to provide too much. So probably you have a little bit of photograph on the property or a little bit of info, but it could be a very lack or very short of information that you need. For example, people want to buy, want to rent. Of course, they need to know the size, the location, right? The condition of the property. So all these a lot are not being presented properly. So what they have to do is they have to call up an agent or the owner and make appointments to actually go to the site, go to the property to view the property, to do the due diligence. So that is what we see that is happening. But because of the pandemic happening now, and because of the movement controls and lockdowns and whatnot, so all this cannot happen anymore. So people have to look for an alternative way, using a digitalized way or a more due diligence to be happen online, and to rely on a better a platform that provides better information that are related to the property. Yeah, I think that is the challenge now that people are facing.
Yeah. So
it's a very good point. Yeah, sorry, Navonil.
Yeah, if I can add, so I wanted to bring a slightly different dimension to the due diligence process. So one is transactions, and I think the other is where we operate is in the area of collateralization, because the same asset is also used as a collateral for lending purposes, and that's where we see an opportunity around. And I believe the challenges are, obviously, I think one, as Wong mentioned, obviously the current pandemic and things like that. But I think there are also other challenges, because a lot of the, sort of stuff is very paper-based. So there is an absence of technology, and it becomes very much accentuated once you look at more developing countries where, land records are paper-based and so on and so forth. The other is it takes a lot of time. So as a property developer, or even if you're doing transaction, if you're buying or selling, it takes a lot of time, and you lose that opportunity to sort of perform your business operation. So I would say the paper-based solutions, the time that it takes, and the other thing that I've been seeing, and we're doing some work in the United States where there are a lot of sort of legacy-based businesses that have been created around land title management, and they're very large, and they are sort of hogging a lot of portion of the revenue which could be opened up if there was digitalization and decentralization, and that's I would see would be the third challenge. So those are the challenges that I see from my lens.
I think it's very good points. Thanks so much for starting us off there. I think with due diligence, your information is key, and then it's having the information available, knowing where to get it. And like you said, in a digital world, if you're dealing with a paper trail, which it's still like in a lot of countries, whether they're complex or developed markets, there's a real need for solutions to make this clearer and easier for parties to access and share. And there's some great stuff across the globe, obviously happening. And then obviously the structure of the real estate transaction process is quite important. So one thing to highlight, in my view, due diligence obviously sits outside of the transaction, but it can really help, once the deal goes ahead, you've got all the information, and the parties like the conveyancer, etc., can really make things happen. So you make really good points. I think that we're dealing with paper in a digital world a lot of the way. So we've got to find ways to digitize property records, perhaps a property record or information system using blockchain or something like a digital ledger. So it's hard though, because if it's linked to the deed registries or the deeds office, at least in South Africa, where I'm based, that's still quite a manual machine, and it's very complex. So there's a lot of work being done to digitize deed registries, which is, for me, that's one of the most exciting, I think, Proptech events hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, because it will unlock so much within the market. And we're talking about availability of data. But your due diligence, I think that's a big thing, is actually, digitizing data, finding data, verifying it. And then, Wong, like you said, we can't forget that property is a physical asset. So you've got to have an inspection, and you've got to facilitate that. And again, there's some great solutions around that. So I think all this together really touched on important kind of pain points. And these are the areas where Proptech can come in. So just going on that, and I touched on this a little bit, how do you think Proptech or other tech interventions can address these pain points, if at all? And perhaps you have some examples from your own markets or other markets. Perhaps, Wong, if I could hand that to you.
Sure. Yes, okay. Coming from a Rentlab point of view, because we are doing rental platform, it's a marketplace. So what we do is, as we talk about digitizing all this information, so basically a lot of this process is still manual to digitalize it, but however, once we manage to do that, okay, all this information being listed on our platform, the user or the tenant comes in, basically he or she can have 95% of the information required from one source already, because we have done the work, right? So of course, coming to technology, there's also other technologies that we integrate to our platform, such as the virtual tour. Okay, I mean, from previous, let's say 10 years ago, people starting using photos, taking a lot of photos, then taking videos, and now we can use 360 virtual tours, 3D floor plans, and all these what to call 3D AR VR type of technology to actually present and let the tenants actually have a better sense of what this property is all about. And of course, in doing so, we have to also ensure that the video or the 360 virtual tour that is presented is always most up to date. There's no point in showing the property which is 2 years back, and totally today is completely different, whether it looks newer or condition has worn out, then of course that is what we can do. But of course, just to highlight that, you need to make sure that all this data being presented is always most up to date and current.
Yeah, so I think from our end, the way we see it is a couple of types of solutions. So one is to bring in NFT, non-fungible tokens. So one has sort of seen the rise of NFT in the blockchain space, but it's been mostly in the entertainment context. So what we are doing is we are bringing in the land titles we have converted into NFT. So that allows for visibility of the land title, and moment there's a transaction or it's being used as a collateral, then that's very much visible on the blockchain. And as you all would know, blockchain makes it very super transparent. Everyone knows exactly what's the transactions happening, who has it, and which wallet owns that land title, where it's moving. So that's one of the things that we are doing. The second bit that we are doing is we are also bringing in additional information. So through an IPFS database, we are picking up, visuals of that land valuation, vicinity analysis. Those data points are now associated and stored with the land title. So that is now, again, additional information, just not the title. You have all this additional information that's available. And thirdly, we've created a governance structure, again, using the blockchain, where valuers and lawyers are sort of vetting those land titles, and they're sort of voting to say which of this is correct and which is not. So that ensures some third party oversight on these land titles and their validity and their valuation, and that's being done on the blockchain, again, for greater transparency. So those are the three ways we believe that the blockchain technology can add value to due diligence, and that's something that we have kind of executed, and today we are already executing it on our platform, and we're taking it to multiple markets, but that's how we see it adding value.
Excellent point. So I mean, it's quite amazing. So it's not something I'm an expert in. So people say blockchain, but there's so much more to it. And obviously the NFTs are now, for me as a non-technical person, they're a real practical iteration or use of this general technology. And as you say, it's actually really exciting for property, because obviously it applies to non-tangible assets and transactions, etc. But like we said, trying to digitize these physical paper trail elements of property, I mean, it has to happen, and it's happening very quickly. But there's just, if that happens, there's so much clarity to enable a due diligence process, but you're creating so much valuable data, and you're providing this foundation for so many Proptech solutions. Whether you as a property fund, you digitize your portfolio and you manage it that way, etc. Or if it's more, like I said, at a market level, you could just imagine all this stuff, and through APIs, all sorts of systems could plug in. So I think, it's really exciting to hear your insights, Navonil, because you're involved in this. And it's just, there's so much there. But obviously on due diligence, like now you can actually record and verify, and then this info can be securely stored and shared. I mean, that's what you need at the core, especially in a due diligence process, is collaborative between a few parties. And then Wong, 100%, it's very exciting that marrying the digital and the physical world. There's a lot of really cool things like DR. And it goes a step further, perhaps mapping all these digital twins, etc. But at the very core, doing a physical inspection, you still, obviously it's crucial somebody goes there, and the buyer or renter should always see a property. But the virtual elements do enable you to remotely properly inspect a property to a degree. And if you use a good source or a good provider, it really can address that in a big way. And it can really help buyers, because on your computer, you can do a lot of investigation. But of course, that should lead to a few visits of the property, most definitely, and walking around the neighborhood. You've got to remember this is a physical asset. So I always say you've got to find the marriage, I think, where it works. And I think what you're both saying is totally that, because you're not foregoing, it's dangerous to treat a home as a commodity that you trade on the blockchain. I mean, it could happen, but you've got to remember it's not an equity or a share in a company. So I think you both really hit that nail on the head. So it's exciting, and you could have a whole lot of conversation on all the technologies you just mentioned. But that's what's exciting. You know, there's so much opportunity at all these different points in the value chain, which is what excites me. So I wanted to ask, I know obviously both in your own work and what you're doing, and like I just touched on, if you have any, if you know of any actual like case studies or businesses, but I wanted to ask now, are there perhaps in your work, you don't have to get specifics, but is there like a success case of perhaps a client you had or a transaction you know of where new technology like helped them make the right decision or help the transaction happen? Like, are you seeing this physically happen in like quite a effective way? Just to take that a step further. So Wong, perhaps if I could hand over.
Yeah, okay. From my side, maybe not so much on the case study, but in our earlier session, so I heard one of the speaker, Gary Wharton, he has a company in Hong Kong which does a collection of all these uh, data on commercial properties. So he was giving a very good example, saying that, let's say a property investor, he's looking to buy a industrial property in one spot, but he wants to know what whether this is a good location to invest in or put his business there. So he would like to know, okay, so with all the office buildings around, what are the current price, what are the transacted value, and most importantly, what is the occupancy, right? So they collect all this data for the whole area, so that from one source you can have, you can do the proper due diligence to come up with a wise decision. So I think this is very important, because like here, even here in Malaysia, we see that a lot of these data are actually in silo. They are not centralized. So maybe certain agencies, they have one, some data on this building, some have the other buildings, but they are not centralized or not linked to a government type of database. All right, so that would be a problem. So if we have a centralized database collection of all this information, that will actually help the market, in general, and a lot. In fact, in Malaysia, we also have another startup company called Brick Block. They also specialize in what do you call this, commercial properties, especially office towers. Yeah, so they capture all the information about the office towers in KL. I think 500 of them, but I think they got 200 over plus buildings of that. So if they do that right, I think that would be a very powerful database for everyone to use as a database to do due diligence properly. Yeah, I think that would be something that we are looking forward to as well.
Yeah, so I think if I can kind of share some of our sort of experiences and case studies. So we've already, converted, a land title into NFT. So that's a process that we have already done, and we are already, using that as a collateral for lending. So that's a technology that we have already, executed. And if y'all go to our website, LandOrc, LANDORC.io, you can see our the app, where you can see what are the properties that are available. People are already staking on them, and you can see their land title, which is being offered as a collateral. So that technology we have already executed, and we are now taking it across markets. The other area where we are kind of seeing a lot of interest is if you look at this whole land title insurance space. Now that's not that big in Malaysia or in Asia, but in United States, it's a $22 billion industry where land title insurance is a very common service. But what we are seeing is that it's still dominated by about 4 companies, which are legacy companies, which sort of have about 82% of the market share. So we are currently in the process of looking at launching our technology as a means to decentralize that, because it's $22 billion industry, but it's highly profitable. The claims are only $500 million. So it's a very profitable industry, but it's dominated by a few companies because they have access to the data. So whoever controls that information is able to then charge for it. And what we are doing is through our NFT technology, allowing it to be decentralized. And we believe that that can be a potential game changer for the land title insurance space. So we are in the process of launching that in United States, and that would be one way of sort of widening the set of services. And there are a few other conversations in Latin America and so on and so forth, where the core NFT technology then has other use cases like land title management, title insurance, and other services, so that it becomes accessible, and it eventually brings down the cost of title insurance or title management for in these countries.
I think you both touched on a really crucial point, which is basically data and gathering, well, assembling databases. Because there's a lot of things you can do with the data, but I think in the real estate industry, there's a lot more to be done. So Wong, like you said, those examples of commercial entities gathering that data, and we've obviously, it's market transactional data is key. So, you've got the co-stars of the world, and in South Africa, we have a few providers of this, and as they amass a bigger database, it just becomes really valuable. But I think you mentioned both or one of you mentioned, that maybe perhaps democratizing that is important because you get a monopoly on data. So it's a tricky one. I think the real estate industry and perhaps, industry bodies who are neutral, there maybe is a way to set up a kind of this collaborative ecosystem of data. But there will obviously be data that's proprietary and gives companies an edge. So like you said, the examples you gave, Navonil, like there is, there's a case to obviously be a data provider and you can process data, but it's just, I think data is such a massive conversation, for Proptech. And I think we're just on that cusp. It's great that the more these products get out there, the more like we're just amassing very, very cool data. And, data is the lifeblood of any tech. So I just wanted to highlight, I think you both touched on such a key point, and then bringing it back to due diligence, it is all about data. That's what it is. And verifying that, because it's still very common, in a transaction, there's not enough transparency, or there's incorrect information, and people sometimes even buy a property and they find out that they don't own it. So that is something, this is where you need to avoid that, because that just it impedes the sector. Obviously it leads to people losing money, people that likely can't afford that. So it's just you can't stress enough how crucial it is in that. So that just to highlight that from our side. But you both there, that's just such a key theme to highlight that data. Just to take a step back for due diligence, so I think if we bring it to the residential space, so if you were speaking to a first-time home buyer and you wanted to give them like a few key elements that they should consider in their due diligence, you personally, or based on your experience, what are the key, maybe say 5 to 8, I don't know, maybe something like that. So Wong, just as like, if you were, like I said, speaking to someone and they're asking you, what should I look for?
Okay, I think it depends where this buyer goes. If they go to the property developer, I think they will tell them 101 good things about the property, right? So if they go to the second-hand market, secondary market, definitely they have more choices and more things to look into. But I think when it comes to property, number one, I always say that is, what are you looking for? First of all, is it for investment purpose, or is it for your own stay? And are you staying alone or with a family? So all this will actually comes to make a due diligence and also a decision on what to buy. Next, of course, is the location, right? Whether you want it to be near a house, your mother-in-law's place, or the children's school. So location also plays, or your work, of course, plays a very important side part of it.
Very far away from your mother-in-law's place.
No. Yeah, so coming back, of course, I think it's the condition of the property as well, right? So whether it's a very rundown and you have the budget to do it up to your own liking, or whether you want to buy one that is ready, condition ready to move in ready condition. So that will also be one. Of course, the last thing is the price, whether you can afford it or not, right? I think maybe is that 5? I didn't count.
If I can add, so I think from a sort of due diligence point of view, to me, it would be about the rights to that title rights. So I think that becomes quite crucial, and that's what we are trying to expose in terms of whether do you have title rights to that land or not. And secondly, whether there is any territorial rights or liens that are associated to that property. Again, that's something which we are trying to ensure that there is greater visibility of that, because those things can sort of pop up at a later stage, and that's often not very obvious in the beginning. And we are trying to ensure that there is greater visibility on those components, so that there's no surprises at a later stage for a property owner or a collateral.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you both summed that up perfectly. And it's interesting. Our property is very, it's personal and emotive. And like you say, there's factors like, is it close to my family or the school, and transport, and so it's interesting because there's that hardcore data, financial, technical, legal, but but when I'm talking residential, this is why also it fascinates me. Residential is a very interesting animal, and I think you both highlighted that perfectly. I see Karen is here.
Yeah, thank you very much for your wonderful sharing. We still have a couple of minutes. Do you want to sum up maybe a last word?
Yeah, so let me hand over to Wong and Navonil, then maybe I'll just add a short comment.
Wong, you want to go?
Oh, okay. Yes, definitely. I think come back to the topic, of course, due diligence. Or we also always want to make sure that what we see is actually is a real information, is a true information. So that's why I think Sean just now mentioned about about verification, how do we verify the information, because this can be quite a tedious process as well. For a buyer or for the tenant himself, how do he do the verification? So I think in the data provider, or a platform, in our case, maybe we need to take this extra step to provide this verification, to carry out this verification, to provide confidence to the buyer or the tenants, when they do this due diligence, and to tag in this data. Yeah, I think that's also very, very important.
So, so my thoughts are, I think, if you look at the property industry, it's been there for thousands of years and it has operated in a particular way. And I personally believe that there is a role for technology to change that, and especially within the due diligence space. And that's what personally for me is quite exciting. How do you use blockchain? How do you use NFT? How do you use, location data? How do you use vicinity data to be able to start giving a much more, transparent due diligence? How do you make it decentralized so that it's accessible to a wider set of people? How do you ensure that there is a third-party vetting through a governance structure so that there is more people looking at it and you get reassurance? So those are, to me, are the interesting new ways in which due diligence in real estate is getting transformed. And it's quite exciting for us at LandOrc to be part of that and to shape that. And I'm quite excited about the industry in terms of where it's moving in that context.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. I think you both summed that up perfectly. So I'm not going to try to re-say your words. So thank you so much. I think that was fantastic. Karen, I think we move on to the roundtable, but I'll let you.
Yeah, thank you very much for all your interesting topic and sharing. But due to the time constraint, we really have to end this session, so the next section actually can start on time. So on a separate note, we do have a roundtable, okay, and it's actually a roundtable one. So we can carry on this conversation to the roundtable. And ladies and gentlemen on the floor, you can. Sorry, you can now actually engage the roundtable one, okay, with the speakers, and you just have to go to the navigation and click live now and select roundtable, and you may join it. And you also may join the next interesting panel discussion on digital transformation of property developers. Right? Thank you, and see you next session.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Fab.
Thank you.